digital technologies. Nobody knows who's paying for it. Does the benefit go to the insurance company or the hospital? If
Exactly.
it improves patient outcomes, then you need to go fight the reimbursement battle.
Hello, welcome to the Better Outcomes Show, where we explore the possibilities of a new healthcare. Each episode, we bring you a conversation with leaders across the healthcare industry, exploring topics ranging from new treatment techniques and interventions to novel service delivery methods and business models. And now, your host, Rafi Salazar from Rehab U Practice Solutions, a leader in patient engagement and retention strategy. Let's explore the possibilities of a new healthcare.
Well, hello again. Welcome to another episode of the Better Outcomes Show. I'm your host, Rafi Salazar from Rehab U Practice Solutions. And maybe you fit this bill. Maybe you've tried hiring healthcare consultants before to work with you in your business. Maybe you've hired an ad agency in the past to help you manage digital marketing. Or maybe you've tried your hand at testing out different positioning or go-to-market strategies on your own. Either way, you've probably been disappointed. Maybe you experienced some early results, but none of it was ever sustainable. Or, like many of my clients, you spent hours of you and your staff's time spinning your wheels. Either way, maybe you've made the decision that it's time to leverage deep clinical and industry expertise to drive business development metrics for your organizations, leads, sales, customers, you name it. You know you need to tap into and leverage industry expertise and the working knowledge of healthcare to move the needle for your organization. And the best way to do that is by working with someone who won't hold back when providing feedback and recommendations, but also who has the expertise in the space. Just to give you a little bit of information about working with us or me at Rehab U Practice Solutions, I don't work with barbers, plumbers, or car dealerships. I also don't work with accountants, lawyers, or restaurants. I work with healthcare organizations. If you're looking for someone to help craft a positioning strategy or a business development strategy for your healthcare technology, your device, your software, or your provider organization, and their portfolio includes everything from dog walkers to real estate agents, you probably need to find somebody else. Healthcare is unique, both in its regulatory restrictions, but also in the nuances of lead generation, sales conversations, conversions, and having those discussions with various healthcare stakeholders. You need someone that focuses only on healthcare for your healthcare business. And we can help you do that with the healthcare positioning alignment workshop. In that workshop, we will help you develop an effective, succinct, and unique positioning strategy for your innovative healthcare business that will help drive those metrics that actually matter: leads, demos, sales conversations, conversions, and ultimately customers. In that healthcare positioning alignment workshop, we basically help you answer the question, value to whom? We've given this spiel before on the show, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But if you want to learn more about it, check out positioning.rehabupracticesolutions.com. That's positioning.rehabupracticesolutions.com. Alrighty. This week, we are taking a dive into the world again of artificial intelligence. And I know AI and artificial intelligence, and especially with its application in healthcare, seems to be very clickbaity, right? Everybody wants to talk about their new AI, healthcare tech software, yada, 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 yada. This week, though, I'm talking with an expert. His name is Dr. Ron Razmi. He is the author of a book called AI Doctor: The Rise of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, which again kind of sounds clickbaity, but Dr. Ron has a lot of unique experience in the digital healthcare space. He was a McKinsey consultant for a while. He's a cardiologist. He thought he was going to be an academic cardiologist, as he explains in the very beginning of the episode. And we have a conversation not just about artificial intelligence, in air quotes, and everything that it's going to be able to do for healthcare providers and patients and all of that, which there is some applicability there, and we talk about that a little bit. But we focus a lot about kind of the limitations or the barriers to implementing technology in healthcare. We talk about business models. The title of his book, or the subtitle of his book, is a guide for users, buyers, builders, and investors in healthcare technology. So a lot of the conversation focuses on Not just what is artificial intelligence, how is it going to be applied in healthcare, but we talk about those questions, who pays for it? How does it get paid for? Is it going to be something that's billable? Is it an efficiency play? Does it fit into the business model of the client organization versus the payer organization and all of the nuances? Again, if you've listened to this show for any extent or period of time, you know that the big driver in all of these discussions really needs to be the whole value to whom question. Obviously, the goal of healthcare and the goal of healthcare services and provide and services, solutions, and providers should be to enhance and develop strong patient-clinician relationships. But there's a whole web of stuff all around that relationship that needs to be accounted for, like the payer, like the provider, their workflows, the administrative workflows, how they're paying for it and how it's going to get paid for, all of that kind of stuff. So we dive way into the weeds with that. I had a great time having this conversation. I thought it was really insightful. His book is wonderful. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. It's available. I think it's published through Wiley, but we'll link to it in Amazon so that they've got 2-day shipping, right? You can pick it up. It's a great read. And what I love about the book, sidebar, I am a nerd at heart. I think people know that already. And I love books that have references, and not just like a few references here or there, but multiple references after each chapter. If you've read the book, my book, Better Outcomes, A Guide to Humanizing Healthcare, I've got 15 to 20 references after each chapter because it's just part of what I do. I like taking the evidence and applying it in real life. Dr. Razmi, probably because of his background as an academic cardiologist and his role in McKinsey, there's pretty graphs and illustrations in the book, but then there's also a lot of deep, solid references at the end of each chapter that you can dive more into whatever topic it is. So without further ado, here is Dr. Ron talking about artificial intelligence in healthcare. Well, hey, Ron, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm a fan of the show, and it's an honor to be on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into the world of artificial intelligence in healthcare and about your book, AI Doctor. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about your background, because you're a cardiologist, but then you've been doing consulting. And so give us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this topic of the convergence between AI and healthcare.
Yeah, thank you. I started as a cardiologist. I thought I was going to be an academic cardiologist at the Mayo Clinic, where I was doing my training, and then the next minute, life had other plans. I was recipient of an NIH grant to study computer and data science. They were putting some money into training doctors in these types of technologies, and that launched my career as a guy who develops software and products that could be used to manage patients. And through that process, I decided I wanted to be more on the technology and business side of healthcare. So I went back to business school and then joined McKinsey for a number of years, doing a lot of strategy, M&A, private equity, buyout work. And then I saw the digital health revolution coming. So I started one of the first companies in the space called Accupera, which built population health management software for hospitals to manage their patients more proactively and in an outpatient setting and anticipating their needs so they did not end up in the emergency room or hospitals. And there were a lot of learnings the 6-7 years that I was running that company about how difficult it is to bring digital technologies into healthcare. It's very different than drugs or medical devices. Drugs and medical devices, you need to educate the doctors about a new drug or a new device, and the hospital doesn't need to spend the money. If they buy the drug, they get paid for it and so forth. But digital technologies, nobody knows who's paying for it. Does the benefit go to the insurance company or the hospital? If it improves patient outcomes, then you need to go fight the reimbursement battle. If it doesn't cause patient improvement, but it's an efficiency tool, insurance companies say, "What should we pay for it?" It's benefit to the hospital. So those hard-learned lessons were the precursor for me to sit down and write a book about this area. And through the latter half of the years that I was running Accupera, AI started becoming a thing, collecting a lot of data, building machine learning algorithms that could start offloading some of the things that humans were doing and could be more intelligent than just regular program software. So, and then, the pandemic happened. That's a good catalyst to make sure
Yeah.
you sit down and finish your book.
Yeah,
So,
you get a little bit of extra time, right?
yeah, exactly. So the book is really about what is AI, why AI is an exciting technology for all the issues that we're facing in healthcare, both medical research, but also delivering healthcare. What are the drivers and barriers of its adoption? Then there's a midsection that goes through applications and diagnostics, therapeutics. There are 7 chapters: population health, clinical workflows, administration and operations, life sciences. The last part of the book is about the business of AI in healthcare. And one of the things we've learned, as I just mentioned, is the idea that if you don't have the right business model, not just for yourself, your product needs to enhance the business model of your buyer, the
Yeah.
person who's writing the check for your product. You really need to think through that. So the last part is about the business model for investors, for medical centers, life science companies, and entrepreneurs who are sitting down, spending years developing these products, and then may run into an immovable object, which is your product works, you have FDA approval, but it's for a use case that we're good enough right now. We're not going to be spending money on anything for this particular problem. But you really need to do this analysis up front before you're 2, 3, 4 years into it.
Yeah. I think maybe it was Scott Galloway. I heard him on another podcast say something along the lines of like the worst thing, especially like in the technology space, the worst thing is like a startup that fails slowly over many years versus like hitting a brick wall right away and realizing, oh, we've got to pivot, we've got to shift, something's going on, instead of wasting, time and resources and manpower and everything into getting like FDA approval, like you said, and then finding out, oh, it's not really that valuable. There's no business there, right?
Right. So I really encourage people in the book to go. I lay out a framework for analysis of use cases for people who are about to start building something, or the investors, so they can make better decisions. Maybe not every use case is worth spending time on, but also I have frameworks for the buyers to decide which use cases they should engage with and how to evaluate the companies within those use cases.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's back up to the very beginning because you mentioned what is AI. So why don't you give us your definition, the definition from the book, and because I think that'll kind of frame the conversation. What do we mean by artificial intelligence? Because I think you can get everywhere from like sentient computers all the way to like large language models. So um, just give us your definition. We'll kind of dive in from there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because every time I start a talk, I always apologize to the audience. I'm like, let me give a little primer on
Yeah.
this. If you already know this, I apologize, but there may be people in the audience that are not 100% sure what we're talking about. So this level sets. So I think AI, and AI is an umbrella term. Under it is machine learning, and under machine learning is deep learning. Sort of the taxonomy and natural language processing sort of cuts through. It's a branch of AI, but now most NLP is powered by machine learning. So it's not a different branch, but it's not entirely overlap with machine learning.
Yeah.
And what it is a way is these statistical models that have been developed that can look at a lot of data and find out what the data means.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what really AI is. The historical analytic methods we've had, business analytic tools and so forth, are not really um, capable of looking at the amounts of data that we have these days. Like in the last,
Yeah.
30 years, since early 90s when the internet became a thing, the amount
Yeah.
of
And we
data has
started collecting
exploded
data on everything.
on everything. I mean, look at a human, billions of genes and all the combinations in between these nucleotides, trillions of bacteria and viruses in our gut. And we know there's a relationship between the microbiome and our immune system. And, of course, the food you eat, the way it gets digested is related to your microbiome and your immune system. But we don't know any of this stuff. We don't have
Yeah.
any other tools. We don't have any other tools that's going to help us figure out relationship between billions of genes and trillions of microbiomes. So AI is really at some point becomes a necessity, not a luxury, to figure out the key insights in life and about our human body, and to have the next frontier of diagnostics and therapeutics and so forth. So and the number one problem right now with delivery of healthcare is shortage of resources.
Yeah.
We know we can deliver a more proactive, um, informed care to individuals in their daily lives rather than waiting for them to get sick and come in. But we can't even do the stuff we're doing now. Sort of the reactive medicine we're providing today, we don't have enough resources for it. So forget about it.
Yeah. About
Uh,
proactively looking at something.
as
Yeah.
we say up here in New York, about like now start doing population health management and all of that stuff. We don't have the resources. So there is an sort of stuff that we're doing today that we can hand off to AI. For example, calling patients and figuring out, are they having medication side effect? Are they having any symptoms related to their primary disease, like heart failure or emphysema and so forth, and take that off of our plate. So, in that sense, as we train AI for a lot of the stuff like paperwork in healthcare, administration is a big pain in the ass for everybody. And, so if we can start training AI to take this stuff off of our plate, we have more bandwidth. We can address shortage of resources. So those are two good use cases: the research use case and the
Yeah.
bandwidth use case.
Almost like an efficiency play for the organization, if you would. Like if the doctor's not having to spend all the time going through the charts and looking at this, at the maybe the software, the algorithm can go in and pull the relevant data and display it for the doctor. They can make a decision or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, think about it. I mean, I don't know about you, but like these days when I see the doctor, they come in, they log into the EHR, they're typing.
Yeah.
And as a physician, I notice as I'm constantly looking to see, nobody looks at me or interacts with me. And when I was doing my medical training, there was a lot of emphasis placed on observing someone. Are they in distress? If they're saying they have a 10 out of 10 pain, does it look like they have 10 out of 10 pain? And that kind of thing. None of that is happening anymore because physicians want to type up their note while they're in the room when they remember stuff, but also they don't want to spend their evenings
Yeah.
going back and doing their charts. So if AI, there are technologies now that can listen in on the conversation and be analyzed by AI, and AI could create a nice note. That's a work in progress use case. That's a nice use case, right? To relieve the doctors and nurses from having to type notes and document what they've done. It's not curing cancer. I know that, some people might think that's not sexy enough, but it's a good place to
Yeah.
start.
Well, and I mean, you talk about like doctors taking notes. So I'm like, I think one of the biggest challenges for any healthcare organization right now is clinicians just leaving, right? Like walking away because of burnout. And sometimes
Absolutely.
it's not the curing cancer that keeps them in the game. It's like we just eased your plate and now you don't need to spend 4 hours documenting, after your kid's soccer game or something like that because they did it for you. Like, I think that's a huge deal.
I mean, I think that's curing cancer is going to take time. Newsweek did an article about my book, and they interviewed me, and I was able to convince in this extensive interview the reporter not to get too excited about some of these longevity and curing cancer type use cases about AI. And the title of the article was AI is going to uncover insights about our bodies within a few decades. So I
Yeah.
was able to convince them some of this stuff is going to take time. Whatever AI tells us, we have to go actually confirm in the real world and do run trials. That's going to take time. So this idea that in 3 years this is going to happen, 5 years that's going to happen, we don't know what's going to happen in three
Yeah.
years. We don't
No,
know
I
what's
think
going to
that's a
happen.
huge, huge point. Like the technology is in some ways advancing so much quicker than our ability to validate it, right? Like even just to do a longitudinal randomized controlled trial is going to take years, and the technology that might be have been used at the beginning of that study is already obsolete or something like that by the time the study's results are coming out and getting published.
Yeah, and if you think about these administrative operational use cases, if it screws up, it's okay,
Yeah.
right? Nobody needs to do longitudinal studies on clinical documentation. The doctor could clean up the note, edit it, if it's too problematic every time they stop using it. But, generally that's a low risk use case, doesn't require any clinical trials and so forth. So I'm a fan of like now that I've been beaten down by life and been on different sides of healthcare and seen how difficult it is to bring even like a simple solution into the real world, of starting with simple stuff, solve a nice simple problem, allow nurses, doctors, people working within these institutions to see some benefits that they say, oh, look, this is AI. It's helping me. I used to do 5 steps. Now I'm doing one. That creates momentum. They're going to be more open when you bring a home AI-based diagnostic to them. They're more likely to recommend that for the patient because they've actually seen AI work. If it's all a buzz and about longevity and so forth, and they never see any benefits,
Yeah.
they become disillusioned. They're like, this AI thing keeps getting talked about, but I never see any benefits
Yeah.
in what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, I mean, some of the challenges. So, like in the book AI Doctor, you do discuss challenges integrating AI into healthcare in general, like the healthcare industry. What are the main obstacles that you see? I mean, obviously that one was a big one, like this pitching this unrealistic vision or time frame. And how can we, as healthcare organizations, as consultants, as clinicians, how can we overcome those obstacles as we're trying to really innovate our way out of the problem that we have here in healthcare?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, there are a lot of barriers. One of the things I mentioned as a joke in my Newsweek interview, which astonishingly ended up in the article, was the issue of data. I mean, AI needs data, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Excuse me. So AI needs data. If you don't have good data, it's not going to be able to do its thing. So
yeah.
what I mentioned is that's when I brought up when I was asked about problems with healthcare data, I said, no. Israel and Palestine have had problems. What's going on with healthcare data is way past that type of an issue because it's really a healthcare data is in poor shape. It's fragmented. It's incomplete. There are errors in it. And consequently, if you are using AI to assist in patient management, that could lead to catastrophic decisions, right? I mean, healthcare data, if we're missing a key piece of data from you, if we assume your kidney functions are normal, but you've had a test recently that shows your kidney function has deteriorated rapidly, that completely changes what needs to happen with you, right? A lot of those recommendations and insights are now obsolete because there's been a major shift,
Yeah.
and something that's so foundational like medication dosing and how you medications that are given to you because of your kidney issues. So it's important to realize that a lot of the ambitious use cases around clinical care is going to be kept at bay until we solve the fragmented data problem. That we're
Yeah.
going to need, then we're going to need realistic problems for like a unified patient record where, I live here in New York City. I go to NYU for my medical care. Sometimes I go to Weill Cornell. They're separate systems and they have key pieces of
And they don't
my
talk to each
medical.
other. Yeah.
They don't talk to each other. So that's a real problem. So I think one of the main barriers to the adoption is this idea of data. And with you can't really have AI without good data. The
Yeah.
other issue are the business model for the buyers. So if a medical center, if a life science company is buying this, what's the benefit to them? Are you bringing more revenue in for them? Are you lowering their costs? Even if you are lowering costs, you're bringing revenue. If you can't get the data in the real world to feed into the AI model so that it can make its predictions and help do what you need it to do. But also part two is if your solution doesn't fit within existing workflows,
Yes, that's a huge one.
the adoption could be very low. So I would say maybe we can say three pillars: the business model for the buyer, the data issues, and then the fit with the existing workflows. Those three problems you need to make sure you've accounted for before you start building it. And don't be too optimistic with that stuff. Like, don't assume all the data sits in one EHR. Even within the same healthcare system, the data could be sitting in different information systems.
Yeah. Well, and that's such a big deal too, because I think we take for granted that it's all on a medical record somewhere. But like you said, if they don't talk to each other, then you're missing key information either on the individual level, but I'm thinking like research too, and what it takes to validate and generalize results. Like if you've got disparate centers of data and you're trying to train an AI model and it's missing a key piece, then basically everything that algorithm spits out, you have to question because you don't know if it had the good underlying data to train it on, right? And then on top of that, you got the piece of the individual. Like you said, if this individual had a test done that isn't in the EHR, it's just a mess. So, what's
Yeah,
the
one of the things that people are now pressuring the FDA is FDA has really lowered the bar to approve AI
uh huh?
solutions. We've gone from like five in 2017 to over 700 approved AI
Yeah,
applications in healthcare. People are saying when people submit their application for approval, they should submit the data they used.
yeah,
There's got to be a review of the underlying data. Was it too homogeneous? Did they use different demographics? Did they have enough women, enough minorities? Uh, did they account for different subpopulations? Like people are pressing, and some of the major institutions like New England Journal of Medicine are saying, we could be the ones that look at the like the underlying data and make sure it's high quality and the model is well trained. You can imagine this is beyond the capabilities of the buyers. No medical center has people on the staff that can audit these models and
exactly.
stuff. Can you
Yeah,
imagine how long the sales cycle would be if they need to audit these models and make sure they're good quality before
yeah,
they buy it? You can forget about it.
yeah. So, like, what is one of the ways we can get around that? Is it like some kind of API system or something like that that allows free flow of information? I mean, you mentioned a unified record system, but part of me thinks like that's another 100 years before before you get people to agree to something like that. So like, how do you get around the data piece?
I think as you mentioned, the main barrier to a unified patient record are political issues.
Yeah,
There are countries like Japan, France, where you have a unified patient record. No matter where you get care, it does feed into a central database. So NYU could have their database. Cornell could have its own database, but I have a national unifier, national ID. No matter where I get care, based on that ID, their system feeds my data into that central depository.
yeah,
Therefore, like I had a really bad accident last year on my bicycle and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance and Harlem Hospital. They had none of my records.
Yeah.
from my, they were taking care of me without knowing anything about me. And I just had a concussion, lost consciousness and stuff. I can't really give him much. I'm out of it. Uh, and then when I saw my PCP at Cornell, he knew nothing about my accident.
Yeah.
So if the data feeds into a central database for everybody, then if you go to a new institution, they can pull it up and see all of your records. That's really, the API solution. I think we've been working on interoperability now for over a decade. There are too many nodes to connect these nodes.
Yeah.
Even within New York, I mean, like, or Augusta, wherever, there are mom and pop healthcare providers that have like a, you know, basic EHR that meets the requirements, government requirements. And when you go see them, they're putting your stuff into that EHR.
Yeah.
And that could be your allergist that's giving your allergy medication. That medication is now missing from, your
For your
records
profile.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
So how do you connect all of these nodes within? It's not possible to build all these APIs. I think you need aggregators, and
Yeah.
an aggregator that goes door to door and says, build an API into our aggregator. It's just too limited. Everybody needs to be mandated to send the data from people into this central database, and other countries have done it. And then with that, you have a level of confidence that you have all the data on one person, and then eventually the data from our wearables, anything that
Yeah.
we're collecting, that could go into the same place. Because if you're going to start building AI models that can help us with longevity, how our daily activities, diet, environment affect our health, you need to collect that data, and you need to have my genetics and all the other stuff, and then start running models on those to see what the relationships are.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing about wearables is funny because it is like almost at this point the consumer market is driving a lot of the wearable technology, right? Like I've got a Garmin, some people have the iPhone, the Apple Watch, and the data that those devices are pulling can in a lot of ways be considered medical data, like healthcare data. And there's that kind of there's a regulatory piece of like, okay, at what point does this become like, you know, under HIPAA? Like, at what point does this become like personal health information, and what point is this used for like marketing, more products to the users and all that? But there's some real valuable healthcare data that can be integrated into, the PCP could be greatly benefited by saying, okay, the activity level or the sleep tracking of some of these stuff of some of these devices. It's just it's an interesting topic for sure.
Well, I think if we're collecting this data, increasingly collecting this data through our smartphones, through wearables, sensors, there are now sensors that can track your activity passively indoors.
Yeah.
Um, we want to use this data, right? We want to use this data for research to figure out answers to um, how does food affect you personally based on your genes? Someday we may be able to recommend the perfect diet for you based on the fact that your genes are very strong in certain areas, but they need to be augmented in other areas based on your genetic roadmap. The type of diet that makes you the healthiest could be very personalized
Yeah.
for you. Right now, we're not anything close to that, but that is possible. But it's only possible if we have years of collection of data on what people eat, and then their impact on their epigenetics and microbiomes, and their clinical outcomes and so forth. So I think if this stuff, um, these wearables are collecting good information, if we can collect all of this data and aggregate it, we can start learning things from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Okay. You mentioned, okay, so we had the big pillar of data. what about the business model piece of that? So you mentioned a little bit about, okay, does this AI, is it an efficiency play? Is it a revenue play? Like, there's also the whole piece of like return on investment and reimbursement and like the money side of it. I know people don't like to think about the money side, but at the end of the day, providers are running a business and they want to look at any kind of investment they're making in healthcare as either adding money to the bottom line or taking money away from their expenses, right?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that if you're a healthcare system, if you're a physical therapy or establishment, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you have a lot of people banging down your door. You see hundreds of products being pitched to you every year. So how do you choose? I mean, you don't have unlimited budget. Health
Yeah.
systems notoriously run on single digit margins. A lot of them are nonprofits. They need to invest in more facilities and more MRI machines and so forth. So there's sort of the core of their business that they're going to need maintaining their electronic health record. Usually they can invest in one or two new technologies a year, things that don't exist in their stack, and they can get it to provide it to, part of their staff. So making that decision is not easy. Everybody comes in, in the old days when you were selling a pacemaker, you could come in the room and put your pacemaker on the table and people could pick it up and look at it. It was real. With software, everybody could come in and say exactly the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard to test it, that what are the capabilities? How good is it? How would this fit within my technology stack? So I think if you're a vendor, if you're selling a health AI solution, thinking through the business model of your buyer, target segment, coming in with a full business plan for them in terms of what is their total cost of ownership. It's the licensing fee they give you. It's the FTEs they need to assign to this to implement it. It's the FTEs that are going to need to maintain this on an ongoing basis. It's going to be ongoing education fees that they may need to. There's the total cost of ownership is not just the annual licensing fee they give you. So you need
Yeah.
to figure that out and then tell them, here are the benefits you're getting. You can use this to attract more patients into the medical center. You can bring 5% more patients next year. Therefore, your revenue is going to go up this much, or calculate the cost savings. You really need to do this for them in order to get them to choose your product. The better that analysis, the more likely you're to convince them. But matching what you're building with their mission critical needs that they're shopping for technology right now is your best way to get in the door.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, we're getting near the bottom here, wrapping up. Just one of the last questions I wanted to ask is you do emphasize a lot the importance of having industry specific experts involved in healthcare technology and AI projects. So I'm assuming you mean on the healthcare system side of things, but I'd imagine it probably is beneficial on the tech or the dev side as well to have clinicians involved or industry specific experts involved. So what steps do you recommend that organizations take to ensure they have the right expertise on board for any of these projects, whether it be on the organizational side or maybe the tech, the software side, to make sure that there's going to be a good product market fit or that it's going to be successful when it's implemented clinically?
I would say number one is that a lot of these products are being people who know how to build health AI products or AI products or PhDs, people who know data science. It's not healthcare people.
Yeah.
That explains some of the misalignment that's happened where I mentioned 700 FDA approved products, but not a whole lot of them have gained adoption in the real world. So there are people who think if they build an algorithm that helps a radiologist reads an X-ray, that's automatically going to be purchased and adopted. You know, if it presents a risk to the radiologist's job and income, you can bet it's not going to be adopted. If it's just uh, helps the radiologist be a little bit better or accelerates things a little bit, that's not enough of an ROI for the medical center to invest in it.
Yeah.
So this issue of people who are know how to develop this don't necessarily have intimate knowledge of healthcare business models or workflows or the needs of the users explains why we still haven't seen a huge impact from applications of AI in healthcare. So the more you can bring in those end users, but also engage the buyers, the better chance you have to develop something that's actually addresses a real need and it's going to have a better chance at adoption. Now, one of the things that happens is people bring in a couple of doctors, they do focus groups, the doctors chime in on features and so forth, and that's good, but it's hasn't been enough. That seems to be too simplistic. The
Yeah.
doctor could say, yeah, if I have this, I would use it, and you're like, oh my God, there's need
Yeah.
for
We're on to
this. Let me
something
go.
here.
Yeah, we're onto something, but it happens that the data you're going to need in the real world is a real messy. In your lab, this works, but when you take it into the real world, the data sits in too many places, so it doesn't yield the intended results. Or you don't realize the fact that even though this pathologist might want this or would use it if it's put in front of him, the medical center would put this way down their list because they have more important stuff to spend money on. So it needs to be a much more comprehensive set of stakeholders. And really for you to say, where is this problem in your list of issues? Would you spend money on this? Why would you spend money on this rather than, opening up another surgical center that can bring revenue in, or figuring out the data within the real world environment and seeing is the data going to be available for this? So that kind of simplistic. We have a doctor in our team, and he really likes it and stuff, and he's providing input on what to develop. That doesn't seem to cut it. It needs to be much more of you need to go a lot deeper.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point. Some people think they get their resident clinician on board and they're like, okay, we're good. We've got this, this clinician does this stuff and he knows. But you do, like you said, you need to think through all of it, not just the does this clinician think it would work, but how is it going to work in the context of the environment, right?
Right.
Cool deal. Awesome. Well, we're at the bottom here. So if people want to learn more about you, about the book, maybe even some resources around, using AI in healthcare, where can they follow you, find out about the book, purchase the book, all of that kind of stuff?
So the book is available on every place that you buy books, including Amazon. The publisher is Wiley.
Okay.
And Barnes and Noble website, Amazon website, and so forth. I learned through this process that most books are sold on Amazon.
Yeah.
And our website for our investment firm is zoicap.com. That's ZOICAP.com. And I have a blog that I've been writing for 2.5 years. It's called the AI Doctor Blog, where I
Okay.
tackle the latest advancements and I get into, for example, the topic of reimbursement, and I do 5 weeks of blog posts on the topic of reimbursement or generative AI. So I have that blog that sort of is a more of an ongoing discussion around these topics.
Okay. And that was AI what.com?
That was zoicap.com. That's
Zoicop.com is the
Zoicap is for the blog and our
Oh, okay.
investment firm.
Okay.
And then to buy the book, people could go to Amazon
Amazon,
and
yeah.
put AI Doctor: The Rise of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare. It's the
Okay.
first thing that comes up.
Yeah, and we'll link to that in the show notes. So, Ron, thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you very much. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Ron Razmi from Zoe Capital, talking about his new book, AI Doctor: The Rise of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare. I think listening back now, there were a couple points that he highlighted that I think are worth reiterating. The one that probably gets talked about a little bit in academic circles for sure, especially when you're talking about health equity and outcomes for various populations and whatnot. The idea that all of this application of artificial intelligence is dependent upon the data with which that algorithm or that language model was trained. For example, if you have an AI diagnostic tool and it's been trained on uh, data from 20,000 patients, 30,000 patients of a bunch of Eastern European males between the ages of 20 and 30 or something like that. Well, the diagnostic criteria, the validity even of some of the outputs of some of that AI system or software, that diagnostic tool, might be called into question, probably should be called into question if you're using it on a population of, let's say, Asian or South American females ages 60 to 70, right? Like the data that is being used to train these AI models needs to really be representative of the population on which they're going to be used, which does mean that there's going to be limitations here and there with where a tool might be deployed based off of just the data that was used to train it. I remember a while back we had somebody on the show who was I'd have to dig back and link to that show, but it was a cardiology another cardiologist, and it was or radiologist, I believe. And it was the topic of the show was using artificial intelligence for to read. I think it was cardiology reports. And one of the things that the doctor said on that episode was that they had to be very cognizant about where they deployed it and how they deployed it, because all of the data had come from a certain hospital system in Israel, for example, and it wasn't generalizable to the whole population. And he was, even back then, this is probably a year and a half ago now that we had this episode, a year and a half ago. And even back then, they were aware of and understanding that the data is important, not just the data that we're collecting in healthcare. Dr. Ron mentioned that too. Like if we get data, we want to use it. That's a different topic, but the data that we're using to train these models on is very important. And we need to understand, one, where it came from, how valid it was, how representative it is of the population that we're going to deploy this tool with. So that was an interesting point, interesting discussion. And then the other piece, which I think is worth mentioning, because a lot of what I do with the positioning alignment workshop, with my clients that are in the healthcare technology space, even my clients that are provider organizations looking at either procuring technology or just tailoring and refining their own value proposition, is understanding the benefit of the tool, of the service, and then how you communicate it, specifically in the benefits and the ROI. So I think the example that Dr. Ron used was like, listen, if you're talking about AI being used as something that's going to be helpful in increasing longevity and casting this long-term vision, you're going to have a hard time selling that product, or you're going to sell that product and then end up with a lot of unhappy customers. Because the thing that is unique to healthcare, I would argue, or at least a complicating factor in healthcare and healthcare technology and innovation, is that the industry moves slower than we would like, obviously. I don't know about you, but when I was in graduate school in 2010, they were talking about how by 2020 we were going to be in value-based care. We were going to be in value-based reimbursement, fee-for-service model of payment. That payment structure was going to go away. Obviously, maybe we're a little closer to it, but not markedly closer to that reality than was being touted in the academic circles 14 years ago. And we're building a lot of these tools, a lot of these tech devices, these softwares, these applications, and one of two things happens. One, they are either built in a way that would be super beneficial and help people thrive in that value-based model, or what our perception of value-based healthcare will be. And they don't necessarily fit into the mold of how do we bill for it today. That's what problem one. Or problem two is that they're only built to reinforce the problem of today, right? And one of the things that he mentioned that I work a lot on with my clients as well is like, listen, what you need to do with your technology, your solution, your app, your software, whatever it is, you need to be able to make it work here, but also position your client for success in the healthcare of tomorrow. It's not enough to just help them double down on a failed business model, if we're talking about the fee-for-service model of healthcare, for example, or double down on a system of billing for healthcare, reimbursing for healthcare, getting paid for healthcare that isn't going to survive the technological onslaught that we're in the middle of going through. But it also can't be so far-fetched that the client organization isn't going to see a return on that investment for 5, 10, 15 years. There needs to be a happy medium. I was just on the phone with a client of mine today, actually, talking about this. Like, how do you balance that, and how do you measure that, or frame your conversation in a way that highlights both of those things? And I said, well, part of it is understanding, one, who you're talking to. Positioning is important, right? Understanding your audience, and understanding that some stakeholders in the organization are going to be charged with that long-term vision, that long-term value creation, and that's what they're focused on. And then you're going to also talk to other stakeholders in that organization that are really focused on like next quarter's results, the quarter after that's results, and for various reasons, whether because that's their performance incentive is based off of the numbers for this past quarter, or their management structure is such that that's what their operation, their day-to-day operation, that's what they're focusing on. So, organizations that have a software solution or some kind of technology, some kind of innovation in healthcare, need to be able to show both value today and potential value tomorrow, and then highlight that depending on who you're talking to and that stakeholder in the organization. And you're able to tailor that vision or the value proposition to what the value drivers are for that individual. For example, somebody with equity in a company and is maybe like a CEO or something like that, is worried about selling in 10 years for $100 billion, is going to be worried about a whole lot more or a whole lot bigger vision than the day-to-day operations manager or something like that. So being able to tailor not just the messaging and the marketing, but then also building your solution in a way that provides value today and a potential for greater value tomorrow. So anyways, those are two points that I pulled out of the conversation after listening back to it. So I think that's it. That's all we've got for this week. Probably in the next week or so, look forward to an announcement about some changes happening in the podcast. I know I've teased it a little bit, but I'm excited about some of the changes happening, and looking forward to sharing that with some of y'all. So if you're on the email list, we'll let you know. If not, you can find out how to do that. Go to www.betteroutcomes.show. You can subscribe to the podcast there. You can listen to episodes. You can get links to all of the guests and their LinkedIn profiles or their websites if you want to explore some of the topics a little deeper. So yeah, betteroutcomes.show. And if you're in the middle of putting together an event in the healthcare space, maybe it's a conference or something like that, or you're looking for corporate speakers and you're planning your tail end of 2024, 2025 schedule, I understand it. Organizing an event is hard work. Pressure mounts, especially when you're considering the speakers that you hire or you select. Often the success of an event or even a strategic corporate initiative hinges on the quality and the impact of the speakers and the advisors that you select. There's no pressure there, right? If the speaker or advisor you choose hits a home run, you've got yourself a great event, or the initiative takes off on the right foot. If they flop, you've got a dud. So I'm sure if you're in that boat, you're in the middle of spending tons of time, maybe your team's time even, researching speakers and available consultants to make sure you have the right fit for your event, your audience, your initiative, whatever it is. If that's what you're looking for, and you're looking for somebody to come speak specifically around humanizing healthcare, about leveraging technology in a way that helps make the connection between clinicians and patients more solid and more human, if you would. Check out the webpage we threw together about speaking. We are in the middle of booking out right now into tail end of Q3, Q4 of 2024 and into Q1 of 2025. So you can learn more about that and hiring me to speak at speaking.rafisalazar.com. That's speaking.rafisalazar.com. Alrighty. And if you like the show, share it with a friend, or somebody that you think would find it valuable. They don't need to be a friend, a colleague, an acquaintance, somebody that you think would find benefit in the show and the topic. It doesn't have to be this episode either. We've got 125 episodes in the backlog. I'm sure you will find something in there in the healthcare space that suits your fancy. Until the next time, folks, be safe, be healthy. I will talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Better Outcomes Show, where we explore the possibilities of a new healthcare. Our hope is that you walk away from each episode informed, equipped, and empowered to push the boundaries in your own practice or business. We want to give you the tools to help you build strong, long-lasting relationships with your patients and clients, helping meet their goals, improve their health, and achieve better outcomes. Learn more at www.rehabuppracticesolutions.com. We'll catch you on the next episode.